We'd like to say good morning to everyone and just wanted to say welcome to the Baltimore City Senate Delegation's weekly virtual bill hearing. I would like to call this hearing to order at 9:01 a.m. I'm Corey McCray, Senator for the 45th Legislative District and Chairman of the Baltimore City Senate Delegation. Before we get started, I would also like to acknowledge our colleagues that are currently in the room at this moment. I want to start by Legislative District. We have Senator Jill Carter that's with us from District 41. We have Senator Murray Washington from District 43. We have the Senator from District 46, Bill Ferguson, and we will be joined momentarily by Senator Sidnor for District 44. At this moment, we will be hearing one bill today, Senate Bill 276, the Johns Hopkins Repeal Police Department, as introduced by Senator Carter. After hearing Senate Bill 276, we will vote on Senate Bill 789, colleagues. Senate Bill 789, Visit Baltimore Appropriations Calculations. We do have a number of witnesses today to provide oral testimony on Senate Bill 276. Our witnesses will be given 2.5 minutes to provide testimony. I would also like to acknowledge that Senator Carter will be given as much time as she is needed. Obviously, she is the Senate sponsor, and then the lead panel sponsor that Senator Carter has put forward, we will give 5 minutes. So after that, 2.5 minutes for everyone else, the lead panel sponsor, 5 minutes, and obviously the senator will get the time that she needs in order to discuss her bill. At this moment, I would like to start our bill hearings. And Senator Carter, as you are the bill sponsor, I would like to give you the opportunity to discuss Senate Bill 276.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, colleagues. I appreciate your hearing this bill. It is appropriate that we re-examine the efficacy of the creation of a Johns Hopkins police force. This bill would repeal the police force created by Senate Bill 793 in 2019. By repealing the creation of a Johns Hopkins private police force, this bill affirms that policing is a public function and that there is absolutely no advantage in privatizing an inherently public function. A privatized police force that is responsible only to a private employer, such as Johns Hopkins University, rather than public officials, creates an organization that cannot truly be accountable to the public, regardless of any civilian oversight or an accountability board is created in this bill. This private police force that answers only to a private organization, but is allowed to patrol, stop, arrest individuals outside of the Johns Hopkins campus is given too much breadth for a private organization. While Hopkins has indicated plans to have civilians oversee their police force, the oversight board would only be able to review specific instances of concern and recommend policy. The board would have no real power to implement policy based on those concerns. The last year has made the world take a hard look at the relationship between policing and race. Baltimore City, as we know, is a majority Black population. It has a difficult, contentious history with the Baltimore Police Department, and I posit with Johns Hopkins itself. Baltimore City has had to look at the relationship between itself and policing time and time again. Hopkins has a record of exploiting generations of persons of color in the city and the university's namesake, Johns Hopkins, himself a slave owner. Ultimately, in considering the benefit of a Hopkins police force, the community a majority of the community neither wants this policing nor needs this policing. In 2019, before Hopkins finalized plans to create a police force, the Hopkins community and nearby neighborhoods organized to oppose this creation. Over 100 professors at Hopkins spoke out against creating the police force. A student referendum indicated that 75% of the student body was opposed as well. Members of the student community led a month-long sit-in at Garland Hall on the Hopkins campus to oppose creating the police force, which ultimately culminated in the Baltimore Police Department physically removing students from their protest. While Hopkins moved forward with plans to create a police department, the community largely still stands against it. In June 2020, with no notification to the legislative body or anyone else in the community, we heard that the Johns Hopkins itself had decided to delay implementation of this police force, which it urged us to create in 2018, and we didn't, and then 2019, saying there was an urgent need to do so. But recent actions show us that that need is clearly not perceived as urgent. Surrounding community members and neighborhoods started a petition against the creation in June 2020 upon that announcement from Hopkins, and that petition amassed over 6,000 signatures within 3 weeks. The student body at Hopkins continues to organize its opposition, with 24 student groups signing on to the community petition as well. Since this summer, at least 382 professors at Johns Hopkins have publicly called for the cancellation of plans to create the Hopkins Police Force. The area where Hopkins police would be deployed is already heavily policed, including over 1,000 security personnel that work for Hopkins. These security personnel also include off-duty officers from the Baltimore Police Department. Additionally, the Hopkins administration has indicated there's no truly pressing need. And so this bill calls for the repeal of this force. It also calls for us to affirm that policing is a public function that has no reason to be privatized and unaccountable to the public it polices. Given what we know about the relationship between race and policing, bringing more police into an already heavily policed and patrolled area serves no substantive safety benefit, and also further places minority community members and minority members of the community in an uncomfortable position at best and unsafe position at worst. Finally, for those that contend this is a necessary additional tool to help decrease violent crime in Baltimore City, I remind us that this police force created by our legislation is limited to 3 minuscule areas of crime: theft, auto theft, and burglary. No assault, no rape, no armed robbery, no murder, no shooting, no stabbing, no sexual assault. This police force has no jurisdiction over violent crime whatsoever. For those reasons, I would urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 276. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carter. At this moment, I'm going to start bringing up your panel members. The first one that we have as the lead sponsor is Mrs. Joan Floyd. Mrs. Joan Floyd, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you from a particular point of view, that of a longtime neighbor of the institution and a citizen who believes firmly that the authority to provide the police public areas and public spaces is not to be given to a private institution. A private institution with the authority to police beyond its own borders has a conflict of interest that will never be resolved in favor of the public. As I say in my written testimony, this institution will always prioritize and protect its interest. I think everyone understands that basic concept, yet people are being urged to believe, even members of the General Assembly are being urged to believe, that this private police force is some sort of a gift to city residents, rather than something that will take away a degree of our citizenship. You, our elected officials, have a responsibility to see that our rights as citizens are protected and not chipped away. Words like accountability and community policing are a smokescreen. They are advertising slogans, things that lobbyists say. They are not characteristics of a private police force. Just look at my own personal efforts to obtain the video of the first meeting of the Accountability Board. The meeting was not announced to the public, was not attended by the public. As I write in my testimony, the institution called the meeting, set the agenda, hosted, staffed, and ran the meeting, provided the content, and wrote up the minutes. My request for the meeting video, along with other records relating to the Accountability Board, was made on June 23rd. On August 5th, I received an email saying the review of my request was ongoing and I would receive a response in the coming weeks. On November the 10th, I received an email apologizing for the delay and promising an update soon. On November 19th, 5 months after my request, I received an email from the Vice President of Government and Community Affairs thanking me for my, quote, interest in JHU security issues, end quote. His letter, which did not even attempt to comply with PIA requirements, asserted the records were not subject to disclosure and the institution was not required to provide public access. Keep in mind that I was asking for the video of a meeting the public should not have been excluded from in the first place, a meeting we should have been able to attend and record for ourselves, and the institution would not release it. I was not surprised by any of this. It was largely what I had expected. It is illustrative of the institution's attitude and approach to its neighbors and to the public. We mustn't fool ourselves or anyone else into thinking the institution will behave in a truly public-facing way. This police force is part of a long-term plan, and we as citizens are not privy to the plan, but it is certainly intended to affect our future. I am greatly concerned, Senators, that one of the intended effects is to engineer the demographics of areas around the campuses, that after a number of years of a private police force, the residents of these areas will largely be those who actively or passively agree to have their daily lives policed by this institution. It will not be a welcoming place for those who feel otherwise. That prospect is ugly and backward, and the General Assembly will be implicated, but you can prevent that. We hear over and over that this institution simply gets whatever it wants. What a terrible message for citizens to have to hear and process from their elected officials. This is a time for you to stop giving the institution whatever it wants, to choose the citizenry. I do see that as the choice here, the institution or the people. Tell the institution that what it asked for and received in 2019 was a bridge too far, and so we're pulling back now. That would be right and fair. We hear there are people who want this. Of course there are residents who want better security. I don't need to denigrate the security concerns of other residents in order to argue that a private police force is not the answer to those concerns. People experience security issues on a neighborhood and block by block level. We discuss these among ourselves as citizens and with our public police. I've attended meetings at Northern District for more than 20 years, and never in my recollection has anyone ever suggested that the answer to issues that arise is to add another police force, let alone a private one. It was wrong, and it is wrong, to exploit the desire that people have for better security in order to justify authorizing this private institution to have its own law enforcement agency. The General Assembly has been implicated in this wrong, but you can reverse that. So I thank Senator Carter for giving you the opportunity to make that reversal, and I thank all the advocates for giving me this opportunity to speak in favor of Bill 276.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Ms. Floyd. With 4 seconds left, you did. We're going to move on to the next person. Senator Carter, I don't see Ms. Gloria Peterson here at the moment. There is someone in the waiting room with a phone that is unidentifiable. So we're going to move to Hannah Pfeiffer, but if you would like to signal to Gloria Peterson, and then we could do her third if you like. At this moment, I'd like to call up Hannah Pfeiffer.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak today. I am in support of Senate Bill 276. Hopkins, a private institution, should not be allowed to have a private police force. I'm a community member. I live in Remington, and I live 1 block away from Johns Hopkins University campus. Hopkins, again, a private institution, just seems like they want to do whatever they can to please wealthy students, parents, and guardians who don't feel safe sending their children to the university. And so this is a way to have the communities around Hopkins property look a certain way. And I think it's a way to just continue the forced migration of residents of the Middle East community around the Hopkins Hospital campus. And then to just defend in any way at all costs, Hopkins, the reputation of Hopkins, and just the property, the actual physical property of Hopkins. I live in a community that's already has security. There's a security officer that stands on the corner of my street, of my block. And when I have interactions with security, either they're walking the other way to try to avoid you, even if there's actually an issue going on, or there's like this hostile between security and the residents where you're trying to find out information because something's happened and you get like told that you're lying. I've been told I need to do a lie detector test to prove if I'm credible by Hopkins security. This is by police officers from BPD that already are employed by Hopkins that are going to want to be part of their private police force. And so there's already this tension between security even and the community, and then having a private police force that's, again, accountable just to a private institution. As Senator Carter said, that even with a review board that's from the community, there is no real oversight since it's a private institution running a private police force. And this summer they did halt it, which was, I think, a way for Hopkins to look good with what was happening, and to not really mean what they were saying. And so this is a way to say that the Hopkins should not have a private police force. I don't want to have Hopkins respond in my community. My neighbors have also sent in written testimony in support of other Senate bills to repeal the private police force, because they also don't want a private police force in the community.
Ms. Pfeiffer, if you can wrap up your comments.
Thank you for letting me speak today. I'm in support of Senate Bill 276. I live in a community that's close to the Hopkins University, and many people in my community are also in support of repealing a private police force. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pfeiffer. I believe that Ms. Gloria Peterson has joined us. Ms. Peterson, I know that you weren't here, but you have 2.5 minutes. All of the other proponents and the sponsor of the bill has currently spoken, and you are up, Ms. Peterson, and you have 2.5 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Gloria Peterson, and I am opposed to the private policeman because I just don't want racial profiling. My children, my grandchildren are in the community, and I feel like, you know, they need something other than that. They need something done before police are called, before police have to come into our community. Our children need recreation. Our seniors, they need a place to go as well. And I feel like, you know, we don't want incidents where it can harm our children. The police can be harmed. You know, things should be done before the police are called in. You know, we can't keep putting Band-Aids on the wound and not taking care of the wound itself. And I feel like, you know, it's detrimental to our children's well-being, because we need something for our kids to do. Let's invest in our kids. Let's invest in our seniors. Let's invest in our community. Put that money to good use before the police is called in, before we have to call the police. And I feel like it would be good for our children. They need that. Idle mind is the devil's workshop. So give our children something to do. We don't need policemen in our community. We don't need to be separated from one another. We need to be brought together as a community. This is what we need right now. We need to get to know each other. We need to get to know our neighbors, our police officers, bring officer friendly back. This would be good for our children. This would be good for our seniors. This would be good for our community. And this is what I'm looking forward to. This is what I want for them. I don't want to get a call. I don't want to see it on the news about the children, about the seniors, about the police officers. I'm tired of that. Let's do better, because we can do better.
Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. I would first, before we move to questions, colleagues, I just want to let the listening audience know that we are joined by our other colleagues, Senator Antonio Hayes from the 40th Legislative District, and we're also joined by Senator Charles E. Sidnor from the 44th Legislative District. Colleagues, we have heard from the Senate sponsor. We've also heard from all of the proponents. At this moment, I would like to see if there are any questions for our colleagues. Seeing no questions at the moment, at this time, I'm going to move towards the opponents. At this moment, I would like to call up Mr. Connor Scott. Mr. Scott, you had—
Mr. Chair, I believe Senator Washington raised her hand.
Okay. Senator Washington, question for the proponents?
Yes. I'm very, again, Senator Carter, thank you so much for bringing this bill. I do believe the broader issue of privatization is is very relevant, and then we should continue to have that discussion as a General Assembly. And I appreciate you bringing it forward. Also, Ms. Floyd, I believe you made some very good points, and thank you so much, Ms. Peterson, for coming out to speak. I was very interested in hearing more about the 2-year pause and the disbandment of the accountability board or the meeting. I'm just I'm curious about that. Can you tell us a little more about, did it ever meet? What were those meetings like? Maybe it could be Ms. Floyd, and I'll probably ask the same question to the opponents.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to take that. Yes, we learned after the fact, and those of us who were neighbors and in the public, we learned after the fact that there had indeed been a meeting. However, my belief and understanding, based on the reading of the law that was passed, is that the accountability board had no statutory function at the time, because their function is supposed to be tied to the actual existence of a police force. They're not to be used to help create the police force. They're not to be used to help create the strategy of how do we get this to happen. So they were being abused, I feel, by even being called together at that time. And then there were, my understanding was there were concerns. I was told privately that there were concerns that had been raised by some of the members of the board that they shouldn't be meeting. And in particular, they shouldn't be meeting because of the Open Meetings Act, and that it should have been opened up. And I totally agree with that concern. But the university, the institution went ahead and did it anyway, because they wanted to have the meeting privately. So they had this public body that was created by law that had all appointed members, appointed by elected officials, meeting in private with, I think, five staff members. And I only know this because I see the minutes that were written up by the institution, by the staff. We don't know what actually happened at the meeting. We don't know what criticisms might have been aired, because they will not let us see the meeting video. So
I guess I wanted. Yeah, go ahead. Finish that part, and then
I just think that they couldn't use it for what they wanted to at the time. Right. And that's why I think they shut it down, because it wasn't working the way they had hoped it would work. And during the police brutality demonstrations is when they were doing this.
Right.
It wasn't.
Yeah, and I guess, and again, this may end up going to the opponents, but just in broadly, I'm concerned about, we do have and something created in statute, and would a private entity have the ability to disband something that's in statute? And so just understanding the degree to which, having been given this authority, that they are in violation of the stipulations of the authority. But the second question, just to the proponents, has to do with this reassessing and this 2-year pause and engaging with community stakeholders. So you're saying that it was disbanded because the accountability board had to do with the implementation, and so since the implementation is now paused for 2 years, there was an assertion by Johns Hopkins institutions that there would be a pause and an engagement with community stakeholders. Have any of those meetings happened, or do you know anything about the reassessment process? And could a part of this reassessment be, not implementing the police force at all? Has anyone been notified of any?
I could try to respond to that.
Sure.
Thank you, Senator Washington. Just by saying that I don't believe that it's for an engagement. I believe it's for the university to figure out what you all passed in the way of police reform, and where that puts them in the scheme of things. And I believe it also possibly has to do with elections that are coming up in a 2-year period. In that time frame. And I'm very skeptical, because I do believe that they fully intend to have this thing, and I do believe that what they will have it if there's enough left. If the police aren't reformed enough, and That's just my belief. I'm very suspicious, but then I have reason to be.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. But that's a question that I think we should have answered about. Are they in violation of what they're supposed to be doing by code?
Thank you, Senator Washington. I do have a question to the proponents. It was acknowledged that we do have, I guess there's 1,000 people on the campus in some type of security capacity. It was also acknowledged that there are a portion of those individuals that are off-duty officers, so they do have some form of a firearm in that capacity. I guess my question to the proponents, is there any concern that the transparency around who those folks are that are currently carrying firearms and working a regular schedule in reference to force or working on a security force is my question.
I guess I don't think I answered. I don't think I understand the question.
So I guess, so my question is that we acknowledge that there's 1,000 people. We acknowledge that there's a portion of these folks that are off-duty officers that are carrying firearms that are on the campus. We don't know who those off-duty officers are. So is there any concern around the transparency that we don't have around who those officers are that are working on the force at this moment?
Well, I can't speak to anything about on campus, really. I was a student up until 2019, and the time that this was happening, then I got my degree. So I can really speak to what's going on off campus. So my understanding is if there's an officer that is working for Hopkins, but as an off-duty officer, and I have an interaction with that officer is still accountable to the public police. So that's the only thing I can really say. And I don't think that's an answer to your question, Senator, but that officer is still a public police officer, even when working a shift for an institution.
Briefly, I can speak to the testimony that we heard in committee, both in 2019 as well as this year, and some of the written testimony that came in, which was in excess of about 80 pieces of written testimony favorable for this repeal bill. And many of the students and faculty wrote, and I can probably produce some of these testimonies if we don't have them, that the current security force had been problematic, that there had been issues of racial profiling with the current security force, that there had been disparate treatment on the campus, but even more horribly, that many instances, particularly of sexual assault and assault, had gone unaddressed by this security force. They felt, if I can kind of characterize what I got out of the testimony, it was that even with the security force, they have failed to patrol equitably. They've also failed to take seriously some of the more serious incidents. And so to expand now to create an entire police force would seem to be a backwards way to go, rather than trying to make the current security force actually function in a professional and equitable way.
Got it. My last question is, could 60 plus armed officers that are off duty currently be looked at as a police force?
If that question is for me, I mean, well, there's a difference between, first of all, we have Baltimore police officers that work in many capacities, and they do retain their police powers, but that is completely different than legislation that sanctions or approves or advocates or promotes the privatization of policing, because the police created under the Hopkins legislation would be private police accountable only to Hopkins. That's actually a step, in my opinion, in the wrong direction from what we need to do in terms of keeping policing public.
Thank you, Senator Carter. Are there any more questions from our colleagues before we move to the opponents? Senator Washington.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, and I think Senator Carter, you raised in your testimony that the way this was promoted to the General Assembly was in part that the Hopkins Police Force would be an additive effect in addressing the reduction of violent crime across the city. There were a number of assertions made, but again, could you just reaffirm that this police force would not be acting at all to address any violent crime? And if there was a violent crime, who would then be called? If a Hopkins police officer encountered a sexual assault or something that is not in the 3 areas, what would happen?
Well, they'd contact the Baltimore Police Department, and Baltimore Police Department would be utilized in that capacity that they are to investigate, to arrest. The Hopkins Police Department, as created through our legislation, does not have the police powers to make arrests for anything outside of those 3 areas that I mentioned: theft, auto theft, and burglary.
And that was the way that the institution drafted the bill, that it was specifically not. And again, this is clarifying. I just want to remind people just what we're talking about, that it's a police force with all the rights and privileges of independence, doing its own investigations, collecting its own data, not having to share that as a private entity, but not having the full obligation of a traditional police force. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Washington. Seeing no further questions from my colleagues, at this moment, I'm going to move on to the opponents. I'm going to start with Connor Scott. Mr. Scott, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman McRae and fellow senators. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today in opposition of Senate Bill 276. I'm Connor Scott. I'm the interim vice president for security at Johns Hopkins University and Johns Hopkins Medicine. And we recognize that we have the responsibility and opportunity to help our city and community address violent crime around our campuses. The process in the Community Safety and Strengthening Act for establishing a small university-based department is highly consultative, and we've done our utmost to follow both the letter and spirit of that approach. And we agree that it's incredibly important to set it up right rather than set it up fast. And in line with that commitment, following the horrific incidents of police violence we saw last year, the university made the decision to pause the implementation of a future police department. We had heard from many stakeholders that moving forward under these circumstances, and before we had a permanent vice president, would be premature and inappropriate. However, Johns Hopkins has certainly not paused our efforts to address the challenge of violent crime in other ways. We've continued to improve our existing security operations, while also investing in non-police approaches to public safety, like the $6 million 4-year JHU Innovation Fund for Community Safety, which supports community-led efforts to reduce violence. We continue to leverage our resources and expertise to support the city's leadership and their broader public safety agenda. This includes things like providing early financial support to the Focused Deterrence Program, serving as a founding member of the Greater Baltimore Region Integrated Crisis System, which is a $45 million regional collaboration to expand behavioral health crisis services in the region. And we are also working to develop a pilot effort to pair behavioral health clinicians with our campus security and safety officers. As these efforts move forward, we do remain committed to establishing a Johns Hopkins Police Department as a small but important capability in maintaining safety. And just to clarify the authority around types of crimes, it's actually in the investigative phase where we are limited in authority, not the response phase. JHPD officers would be certified by the Maryland Police and Corrections Training Commission, just as all other Maryland police officers are, and would have the jurisdiction to respond to any crime on our property. The limitation in authority is geographically to our property, not in terms of our ability to intervene. Blocking the department before it has begun would be a mistake. It would upend years of hard work of community members, and it would walk away from what may be the most progressive police legislation in the country in terms of accountability. It would also continue to burden rather than support the Baltimore Police Department and leave Johns Hopkins without a viable solution for addressing the very serious set of crimes we face every day. Yes, sir. On behalf of Johns Hopkins, I do urge the committee to reject Senate Bill 276.
Thank you. At this moment, I would like to bring up Ms. Regina Gale Malloy. Ms. Malloy, you have 2.5 minutes.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Regina Gale Malloy. I work at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in East Baltimore, and I live in downtown Baltimore in Senator Antonio Hayes' district, just 3 blocks away from Lexington Market. And I'm speaking today to express my opposition to Senate Bill 276 that would eliminate the Johns Hopkins Police Department. As a single woman who lives under the threat of crime every day, living in Baltimore City and working in East Baltimore, I must voice my strong opposition to this bill that would repeal the Johns Hopkins Police Department. I have witnessed firsthand how community policing can be done right. I live it every day. My home is within the jurisdiction of the University of Maryland, Baltimore Police Department. And in 2018, I attended their 6-week Community Engagement Academy. Participating in that academy completely changed the way I see the police. Since that time, I have become an advocate for community policing because I know that policing can be done right. I have seen it, I live it, and I will continue to advocate for it. Crime in East Baltimore is a very real and shared concern. While working on the East Baltimore campus, I have to be hypervigilant due to regular robberies that occur in the mornings and in the evenings. And I have personally spoken with residents who actually live in East Baltimore and Hopkins patients, and they have expressed the same or similar concerns. To repeal the Johns Hopkins Police Department before it's allowed to even form is not just a mistake, it's a step backwards in addressing crime in East Baltimore. Opponents of the police department argue that we don't need more police. Well, I would argue that we need the right police. Allow Johns Hopkins the opportunity to develop a police department that works for our entire community. I urge this committee to oppose Senate Bill 276. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malloy. At this moment, I'd like to bring up Ms. Deb Baker. Ms. Baker, you have 2.5 minutes. Ms. Baker, you're still on mute.
Sorry about that. Good morning, Chairman McRae and fellow senators. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 276. I'm Deb Baker. I'm the Senior Vice President of Nursing for the Johns Hopkins Health System and the Vice President of Nursing and Patient Care Services at the Johns Hopkins Hospital. I am here today on behalf of the thousands of people that come and go from the Johns Hopkins Health System. These are people that include nurses, providers, health food workers, housekeeping, lab techs, physical therapists, administrative coordinators, and many others. But most importantly, our patients and their families. You've just heard Regina Gale describe the reality and concerns of many of our staff. From a nursing leadership perspective, I want to emphasize the impact that the current level of violent crime has on our ability to recruit and retain the top talented nurses to care for our patients and to keep our beds open. These nurses work 24/7. Right now, we face a significant national nursing shortage related to many factors. But when we go to recruit new nurses at Johns Hopkins, the violence in our city puts us at a strong disadvantage compared to our peers. I want to illustrate this point recently with a story about a new nurse just out of orientation who lives in District 46, walking to the hospital in District 45. She was assaulted at knife point, pushed to the ground, all of her belongings stolen, including all of her identity. The attack left her traumatized, and she's not been able to come back to work. She is considering leaving Baltimore and perhaps the profession. This is just one example. Beyond recruitment, incidents like this also impact our ability to retain. Staff come and wonder if going to the hospital is a safe thing to do. Their families who are out of town are asking them to come back home. We need this simply just can't continue. We need the security infrastructure to ensure that our staff and patients are safe when they come and go from the hospital. As a Hopkins nurse and a leader, I am responsible for their safety. I'm responsible for the safety of the clinical staff and the patients who walk through our doors every day. And as elected leaders from Baltimore City, you share that responsibility with us. It's time to stand up for the frontline health workers who are giving so much every day to care for our patients and for our city. Repealing the Community Safety and Strengthening Act would be a mistake. I urge you to reject Senate Bill 276. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. At this moment, I will like to call up our last witness, Ms. Delora Ifakauche. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. For the record, Dolores Sanchez of Ficalche with Cornerstone, representing Johns Hopkins, respectfully in opposition to Senate Bill 276. There's been much consternation about the decision to delay the implementation of the JHPD. I want to be clear that the aim of the delay is to give the university an opportunity to appropriately evaluate and adopt legislative efforts to advance police reforms, improve existing security operations, and work with local leadership to understand fully the strategy for police reform, improve safety, and violence reduction that the community requires. During this time, however, the university continues their commitment to dedicating resources to alternative violence prevention measures. While there are those who feel there were missteps in announcing the delay, to focus on it as a reason for repeal discounts the university's efforts to address the root causes of crime through investments in community development, youth engagement, and economic opportunity. Further, there's no reason to relitigate and repeal legislation now when there is a very clear codified process to eliminate or modify the authority of the Johns Hopkins Police Department. The authorizing statute calls for a multi-year, multi-phase public implementation process, culminating in a 10-year sunset and evaluation. We've also heard that the university's authority to create a small police force should be repealed to maintain policing as a public rather than private function with little accountability. To be clear, the law passed that authorized Hopkins to create the JHPD mandated that once it was established, the department would be held to the same requirements as all state authorized law enforcement agencies, but that is just the floor. The body also mandated in 2019 that the department be subject to the Baltimore Civilian Review Board, an accountability board, the Public Information Act requirements, an MOU with the city. Body cameras will be required. There's a ban on acquiring military grade weapons, and there's extensive training requirement. And JHPD officers are not entitled to qualified immunity that other departments enjoy. This session, the legislature set out to address the pervasive issues we've seen in policing throughout the country. This body did that a few weeks ago, but it did it first 2 years ago with the Community Safety and Strengthening Act that provided the authority for the JHPD. Johns Hopkins is private, yes, but this is perhaps one of the best opportunities we've seen in decades.
Mr. Ficalche, if you could start to wrap up.
Will do, to develop a progressive and sustainable 21st century policing model. And if it does not live up to those expectations, it will be revisited at the appropriate time as mandated. For these reasons, we respectfully ask the delegation to reject Senate Bill 276. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open it up to my colleagues for questions of the opponents. I'm going to start with Senator Hayes, and then I'm going to move to Senator Washington. Senator Hayes.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and my colleagues and those that testified this morning. Mr. Chair, in the beginning, I'll let you know I have to run pretty shortly. I have a couple of competing priorities in addition to, my mandatory COVID testing that I have to take this morning. But I've long known Joan Floyd and activism, and I think she stayed true and legitimate to, to some of the issues that she's raised. And at the time when we passed this legislation 2 years ago, I was probably the only member of the Senate delegation that lived actually in the impacted area. Since then, I've been lucky enough to get married and move to a different neighborhood. So I'm not as directly impacted as I was, but I still continue to receive calls and outreach from the community members that share the same feelings that, my constituent Regina shared this morning. And I want to thank her for sharing that. The question that I had though for Scott, it was brought up that the legislation was limited and addressing only certain crimes, but you testified that it doesn't limit you from responding, but this is only for investigative stuff. And I believe that's consistent with any other agency operating within the city of Baltimore. For example, I think it's school police who has the authority to respond, especially on any school property, but they don't have the authority to investigate, along with any of the other police departments, whether it's Morgan, Coppin, UMB. They all will respond, but far as investigative authority, that rests sole in the Baltimore City Police Department and its detectives. Is that true?
Yes, sir, that's correct. Typically, the relationship in terms of response to investigations is laid out in an MOU between the Baltimore Police and the other organization. So we're unique in that this was laid out actually in the establishing the authorizing legislation. But yes, the idea is that the Baltimore Police have both the infrastructure and expertise, of course, citywide, to investigate more serious crimes. So smaller departments wouldn't have the capacity essentially to investigate more serious incidents. So yeah, it's a common practice, and that's right. The JHPD is limited in terms of what it is able to do, but that limitation is geographically, essentially to our campus area, basically our property. But there wouldn't be a limitation in terms of our police powers. We would have the full powers that all certified Maryland state police officers have. And I'm not, and as others have pointed out, it would it wouldn't make sense for an officer to witness something like an assault and literally not have the ability to do anything about it. And I would have to go back and do research to see if that's even something that's done in practice anywhere, where you sort of pick and choose the police powers that officers are granted.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Washington.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Malloy. I'm very sympathetic and understanding, and I'm glad that you had a good experience with the University of Maryland school, university police force. Those are state employees, right? Those are public officials. So you should know that I did offer an amendment, an option to provide Johns Hopkins an option to create something exactly like the University of Maryland system, tried to think about how could they join other university police forces. So there is a way to do both, provide an opportunity, but also to have the accountability that a public entity would have. And then that would be truly community policing. So I want you to be very clear that those of us who are looking at how can we make this better and how can we improve upon what was passed or repeal portions of it to fix it, it's not that we don't think the institution should have an ability to have some type of police force. It's very clear that policing is a public entity. And at the end of the day, you get to be the boss. And so I just want to make that clear. Also, the other thing I want to clarify is that I do live in the impacted areas. Too bad my colleague Liz, I'm a Johns Hopkins graduate student. I live in the area immediately adjacent to Johns Hopkins Homewood campus. While I was a graduate student, I attended classes at the School of Public Health. So I'm not coming from this place of some ideological opposition to private policing. I have lived within that bubble. I used to have dreadlocks when I was a graduate student. I was followed by police. I was asked, when I walked into the library, so I experienced the racial profiling that institution could have. I also, and I know that I'm sort of speaking, this will be a question. Since the passage of this bill, I know members of this delegation has reached out to the institution to ask to be helpful with its implementation and have not received any response. I personally, who represent part of the Hopkins Homewood campus, have made multiple attempts. I got a call. I finally got a meeting, I guess last year, that was very brief. And I got a call about 9 o'clock last night from the president wanting to have a conversation. So if we're talking about transparency and accountability, the transparency and accountability that has not been afforded this delegation as representatives has been sorely lacking. There's a great concern about what kind of accountability, again, a private police force would exercise. So I guess this is to the proponents, to the opponents. There's just been this history of lack of transparency, of frankly bullying, of using its resources to get its way. How can the public trust that it's going to be different once they actually have a police force. Like what meetings have you had in the communities, to follow up with this? And this isn't for you, Ms. Malloy. This is for the vice presidents and the advocates, I would say, because it's their, the president hasn't deemed it important to come and talk to this delegation about this bill. So again, I think another sort of statement about the degree to which the administration is willing to have an honest and open conversation with us. So can someone explain to me what has actually been done over the last 2 years to engage the community, in this process?
Sure. So I can take that initially. So we held over 125 meetings to meet with community members, students, faculty, staff to talk about public safety and the concept of building a police department for Johns Hopkins.
Oh, Mr. Scott, I mean, after the bill has passed, post it passage, there, I know it was a great effort.
Senator Washington, let's let him answer the question.
Okay, but he wasn't answering the question I asked. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Scott, please proceed.
Sure. So as we covered here, we did make the decision to stand up the accountability board actually before the department was created, because we agreed with the concept that the accountability board should be a part of building the department. In line with the pause on creating the department, we did decide that the right thing to do, because it's tied to the statute, it was to pause the implementation of the accountability board. It absolutely will stand up again. But we did hold an accountability board meeting. The agenda and minutes are posted online. I'm going to try to post those in the chat so people can see those. I meet just about every day with community members, students, faculty, staff. We are in this period right now where we are not working on police department implementation. So my focus right now is very much on everything else, public safety, whether it's improving our current security force, grant opportunities for community members, really anything and everything to address public safety concerns. That's my whole job and my team's focus. So,
and again, I appreciate and thank the pause. I think that was the right thing to do. I also think we have an opportunity to redo this thing and to do it in a way that everyone can live with, and rather than just focusing on what was. A lot of things have changed. I think there's an opportunity for us to find a better path forward, and I hope you would work with this delegation to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Washington. Mr. Scott, you said something about sharing things in the chat. I would recommend to share with the delegation, either all through via communication through the email, or you can share it to our legislative director, and he'll make sure we all get it. I'm going to go to Senator Carter and then move to Senator Sidnor. Senator Carter.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I feel the need to clarify an issue brought up by myself in the testimony, as well as Mr. Scott, and then also a question from Senator Hayes. So we don't need to speculate about what the law said or what the language of the bill was. Reading specifically from the bill, subject to the requirements of this subtitle, the Johns Hopkins University may establish a police department based on a memorandum of understanding. The memorandum of understanding shall require the Baltimore Police Department have primary responsibility for all investigations and arrests related to specific crimes, except 3 exceptions: theft, burglary, and motor vehicle taking. And the bill goes further to discuss that there could be exceptions where the city or the governor declares a state of emergency, which could possibly allow for the Hopkins police powers to be extended beyond both their immediate geographic area where they can police, as well as their limited policing powers. And so it is clear that this police department, through the memorandum of understanding, would be limited to those areas where they'd call the Baltimore Police Department in to not only investigate, but to make arrests. So basically, they just be like a funneling source, which I am not clear how that actually has an impact on helping those impacted residents cut down on their violent crime. Mr. Scott, wouldn't that be true?
Sure. So certainly the intent of the legislation is that, again, BPD would have primary jurisdiction on investigating crimes. And also the intent is that they would take the lead on taking someone into custody, processing them with central booking. They have the resources and infrastructure to be able to handle that. This, of course, 100 officers divided by 3 campuses and 3 shifts means that it's just a couple officers per campus at a time. So we really wouldn't have the resources to take somebody into custody, process them, transport them downtown. So yes, the idea is that they would take that handoff. But I did want to clarify, it sounded like the discussion was that we would essentially have no means of intervening or even authority respond to incidents other than those 3 that you named. And that definitely isn't the case. We have all the same, or would have all the same authorities granted to any certified police officer in the state of Maryland.
Thank you. Senator Carter, did you have a follow-up, or can we move to Senator Sidnor? Thank you, Senator Carter.
I don't want to belabor this and go back and forth, but based on the language of the bill, I think it's very clear that this ability to respond is really nothing more than what a current security force would do. You'd respond, you'd see something, criminal activity afoot or suspect that it is, and then you'd call the Baltimore Police Department to come in and take care of it. So my concern is that I think that there's a false narrative being put out into the community about what this force will really mean in terms of impacting their safety on and off the campus. And so that is something that I think that, as Senator Washington so eloquently stated, needs to be discussed and dealt with as we move forward.
Thank you, Senator Carter. Senator Sidnor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know Senator Carter doesn't want to belabor this, and I really was not intending on saying anything this morning, but I would like to just pull at this string about the authority of this police, and I want to make certain that the narrative about the legislature's intent from a couple of years ago, it was that this would be a limited police force. So now that I'm hearing how Hopkins is interpreting the language that was passed, I'm somewhat surprised because what I'm hearing is that Hopkins police force, with using its police powers, could be in any of our districts. Is that correct? No, that's not correct. So explain this limitation to me. I mean, if they have all police authority to do what police officers do, I'm not understanding that.
Sure. So they would be certified police officers by the state of Maryland, just as Baltimore Police, University of Maryland Police, Maryland State Police, just as all those officers are. They would have to go to the same 6-month academy and would have the same authorities. But where we are limited is geographically to an area that's in the legislation is called our campus area, which it consists of our property, then the adjoining sidewalk, street, and sidewalk on the other side of the street. And the exact boundaries are laid out. So it's not Johns Hopkins property outside of the exact 3 campus areas that are named around Homewood, Peabody, and East Baltimore. So for example, Bayview Hospital, not named in the legislation, so we would have no authority there. So yeah, the restriction is geographic. And yeah, as we've heard here, the case is certainly being made that it wouldn't make sense to limit police authority in terms of ability to intervene or to help someone who's a victim of a violent crime. So I think that.
So if there's a victim of violent crime outside the boundaries, talk about that for me a little bit. With your interpretation. You all, police can intervene and I mean, help me.
Yeah, so anything outside those specific boundaries would not be within our jurisdiction and would be the sole responsibility of the Baltimore Police Department. And so in that vein, we would not be patrolling areas outside of that geographic area. We wouldn't have officers stationed outside of that area. Those areas would still fall under the Baltimore Police Department.
Okay. And if I might ask Ms. Malloy a question. Currently, Hopkins has its security force. What do you believe that this police department gives you in terms of being more secure than what the current security force has?
Thank you for your question, Senator Sidnor. I believe that with training, proper training of a police force, that will enhance what we currently have. I recently talked to one of my coworkers who actually lives in East Baltimore. we were talking about this subject, and we do quite often. And she said, our security personnel right now, they are stretched so thin. They have their hands full, and honestly, they don't necessarily have the training that a certified police officer would to help with the crime that we encounter here in East Baltimore. And it would be an addition to our security personnel who work so hard. And I know many of them personally, but they are stretched so thin and they can only do so much. So they need help. This would enhance our ability to deal with the crime. And I have to tell you, Senator Sidnor, we are now experiencing crime at all hours of the day. It used to just be in the evenings, but now even coming to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, people are so brazen that there's just, we don't know when any of us may be a victim of crime. So we need to enhance our security personnel because they're so limited in what they can do.
Do you believe that this police or security force could be enhanced in other ways than Hopkins, this private institution, having the authority? As Senator Washington had mentioned, some years ago, we talked about somehow having the university be a part of the university system of Maryland's police force. I mean, you would still get the enhancement, but you would have that issue taken away of having this private entity having these awesome state powers.
Well, see, I guess I look at it very differently, Senator Sidnor. I see an opportunity with the private police force. In addition to that, we have the accountability board, which I am a member of. And I heard some comments about what actually happened at the first meeting. I was there. I was actually in the room when the accountability board met. And that to me, I went through the process of being on that board and was so delighted to have been selected, because that is how we can actually hold the private police force accountable. This is a different model. I would invite all of the senators to think outside the box. We all know that the current policing model doesn't work. I think everybody can agree to that. Here's a new model, and we want to shoot it down before we even have an opportunity to start it up. Let us have this opportunity. This could be a model that could be replicated across the entire country. So I don't see it as a negative. I see it as a positive, and with hope that with this private police force receiving the training that I believe that they're going to receive, having the accountability board in place, that we can revamp how policing is done. So that's where I stand on it, Senator.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Sidnor. I got a question for Ms. Malloy. I know the accountability board was brought up a number of times, and I believe, I know you're not in my district, but I believe you sit on the accountability board. If you want to comment on that.
Yes, and even to Senator Washington's statement about the private police force not having any accountability, that is the purpose of the accountability board. As a matter of fact, in that first meeting, we wanted to find a way where the accountability board could sit separately from the university and have our own method of ensuring that the community has a way to communicate with us and us directly to them. So this was, it was a start of something that I believe is going to be magnificent. And I am looking forward to, once the 2-year pause has ended, to restarting the accountability board. I believe that there's tremendous opportunity for us to not only hold the police force accountable, but to also be that liaison to the community to ensure that what the community is saying gets to the university. And so that's where I stand on the Police Accountability Board. I hope I answered your question, Senator.
Yes, ma'am, you did. I see that Senator Ferguson has a question. Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this helpful information. I have 2 unrelated questions, namely for Mr. Scott or Ms. Sanchez. The first is the current status right now. So take away the legislature, take away all of everything. Right now, and not sort of efforts at root cause crime, like the overseeing of what exists today. There's security officers who are not sworn law enforcement officers. There's off-duty officers that are retained by the university. And then, of course, there's BPD that sort of has primary responsibility for all area in the city. Is that accurate? Am I missing something in that?
That's about right. It is a little confusing. So the majority of our team is certified security officers who go through the state police to get certified. We have a small contingent of special police officers who are also unarmed. They do have some limited police authority just on our property. They operate at the Homewood campus and at Peabody, and they're pretty limited. We overall have about 40 or 50 of them. And then we do employ Baltimore City police officers and Baltimore City sheriff's deputies in an off-duty secondary employment capacity as a small part of our team at all 3 campuses.
And when somebody's off duty in that third scenario, when it's an off duty separately secondary employment, what authority does that secondary employment officer have?
Sure. They have all the authorities that they do under their home agency, be it the Baltimore Police, the Baltimore City Sheriff's Office. It's secondary employment is something that they do throughout the city. Hopkins isn't the only organization that takes advantage of it. And the way that it works is we write an MOU between Hopkins and their home agency that in legal language says, we are able to hire your officers as part-time employees, and they are able to maintain their police authority, wear their uniform, and have their equipment while they're working for us. But because Hopkins is not a police entity themselves, what happens is if they do initiate a police action, like make an arrest or something along those lines, they essentially put themselves back on duty with their home agency and fall under, basically when they're doing sort of normal patrol operations for us, they fall under the security team. But if they initiate a police action, because we're not a police agency, they fall back under the command and essentially put themselves on duty with their home agency.
Okay. Thank you. The second question is, where do things stand right now? What is the timeline? I think there's clearly some major questions about what the status of things right now. Where does the university see things today?
Sure. So we work every day on improving public safety around our campuses. We're investing a lot in our current security team. Even if we do add a police department on top of our current forces, it will still be less than 10% of our overall team. So we're investing heavily in training, looking at policies. We're building towards accreditation. We've brought on a contractor who's working full-time on accreditation for our agency. We are looking at our recruitment and retention policies. We are looking at ways to pay our officers more. We're doing a lot to improve the existing organization. We are in this pause phase around the implementation of the police department. And I think that we all hope and wish we were in a place and end up in a place where police department is not needed. Given the current state, it's hard to imagine that that's where we'll be. But that is part of the idea behind the pause, along with looking at what comes out of the legislation in terms of the efforts that you all are working on. So that's where we are at this point. Violent crime remains a persistent threat. And you heard from Deb Baker about the challenges around recruitment and retention. The same goes to attracting students and faculty. But I think to me, the most impactful and the saddest is when I hear from patients who are afraid to come to Baltimore and literally desperately need the treatment that we provide at our hospital, and they're too afraid to come. That to me is the hardest.
So I guess that's not quite exactly where I was going. That's not the question I was asking precisely. I'm asking what is happening. So is everything on pause? Is there a timeline? Where are things?
Right. No, the only piece of the work that we are doing is the police department. We're full speed ahead at all other efforts in terms of improving community safety.
And if I may, Mr. President, the university has continued their vice president search. It was delayed a little bit because of COVID, but they are continuing with that. In my testimony, I talked about investments that are being made. They've established the JHU Innovation Fund for Community Safety. They are part of the new innovative behavioral health response program, where that is utilized instead of utilizing security forces for behavioral health issues. And additionally, there's been tremendous investments in cameras, blue light emergency phones, lift for faculty, students, and patients that may need to get to and from, lighting, tree cutting. I mean, there are a myriad of other investments and protocols that are being established currently that they continue to focus on to reduce violent crime. So I just wanted to submit that as well, and I hope that's helpful to the
But JHPD, I mean, there is no work happening on JHPD today on whether or not there would be a reopening. It is in a pause phase, and that 2 years from the date of the announcement, that's when a redecision would be planned. Is that the intent?
That's accurate, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ferguson. Mr. Scott, I did have some follow-up questions to Senator Ferguson's first line of questioning. In reference to the off-duty officers that have secondary employment with your organization, I know that you said that there's an agreement with the BPD. Could you talk about if the public wanted to know who those officers were, how that process will work, or if it's even transparent outside of a Public Information Act, maybe?
Sure. So I'm sure that can be made available either through the BPD, and I could go back and look at our Human Resource Office and see if it's something that we could make available. But they all are existing either Baltimore Police or Baltimore City Sheriff's deputies.
And I know that I would be able to get the information, but I mean, like, the rank and file public is who I'm more or less referencing.
Sure. I don't know that we've made that available in the past, and I can check with our Human Resource Office to see if we do release employee names like that, because they are part-time employees of the institution.
Yes, sir. In reference to like disciplinary actions for those folks that hold the secondary employment, while we know the process with the BPD, could you speak to the officers that currently have the secondary employment, and if there was disciplinary actions, would that take place with just JHU, or would that also be with BPD?
We coordinate closely on their home agency on disciplinary actions, because certainly if something happens while they're working for us, their home agency is going to want to know, and vice versa. And we are in a good position in that, because they are part-time employees, if something comes up where we decide that we don't have confidence in them, we can simply remove them from the schedule and cut them as a part-time employee. It's a little bit more challenging for BPD to deal with those types of issues, but yeah, we work closely on discipline.
Last question, in reference to maybe a complaint filed with their primary employment, does the primary employer communicate with the folks that they know has a secondary employment at some point in time?
Yes, it depends on the nature of the complaint and where it is in the process, in terms of initial complaint, whether it's being investigated or founded. But yes, it's something that we are hyper vigilant about. And again, it's very easy for us to say this person is no longer on the schedule because they are a part-time employee. So we can react very quickly when we do hear about things like that.
Thank you. I'm going to move to Senator Washington.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I want to thank you, Chairman, again, for us having this opportunity to have this really good, open, honest discussion. I also want to thank again Ms. Malloy for her enthusiasm and belief. And could you remind me what your position is with Hopkins again? I'm just trying to, I forget what you said in your opening.
I'm an executive assistant.
Okay, great. And so you work for Hopkins, and I just might submit that your position being inside of that institution, which is what it's designed to protect, is slightly different from, I guess, Ms. Peterson. You've been listening and you've heard, what Ms. Malloy said. You have a sort of a different view about what policing was. Could you just remind us what that is? And again, just why I say this is that, the administration cannot ignore the fact that you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of students and faculty there in opposition. You've got people who are supportive, but you're getting a lot. And there are different points of view that cannot be ignored. And so we as legislators represent all those people, right? And so we must, provide an opportunity. So Ms. Peterson, could you just remind us again, you've heard what Ms. Malloy said, you've heard sort of discussion. I'd love to hear sort of your thoughts as what you see.
Senator
Yeah.
Washington, I'm gonna ask Ms. Peterson to do it quickly, but I just
You
want to say, like, we spoke with the proponents and we're on the up.
I understand, but I appreciate this. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm outside of Hopkins, so I see it differently. I'm concerned about our youth. I'm concerned about our seniors. This is like putting a Band-Aid on a problem for me. It's like not really solving the problem of what we really need in our community for our people. I don't want any more police brutality. I don't want any more deaths. I don't want to see any more mothers cry. I don't want to cry myself. So I see it differently. We need something for our youth. We need something for the seniors. We need something for people in our community, and stop putting Band-Aids on the problem. The police is not the problem. They only there to assist the problem. We need help before the problem starts.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you,
my
Ms. Peters.
concern.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. Thank you, Chairman, for that. Thank you.
No problem at all. At this moment, I just want to see if there are any more questions from any of our colleagues. I believe that we all got in some form of capacity, but just want to make sure. So seeing no questions, that ends the bill hearing for Senate Bill 276. Before I just want to say thank you very much to all of our witnesses for joining us this morning to provide oral testimony on Senate Bill 276. Please know that you're free to remain with us, but we do ask you to turn off your cameras, and we do also ask you to remain muted. Senator Carter, did you have a question? Was your hand still up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hesitated because it wasn't really a question, and I didn't want to belabor this specific issue because I think that we'll have more discussions about it amongst ourselves and hopefully with Johns Hopkins. But I felt that Mr. Scott, his testimony was confusing and it concerned me, as Senator Sidnor pointed out. There seemed to be a conflict in his testimony regarding his interpretation of the Hopkins police ability to patrol, what areas they could patrol and what authority they had. And I think that's of critical importance, because if they're confused or not really clear, that doesn't make for a police force, even if it were to continue, that follows our intent or the specific way that the bill is written or the legislation is written. So, I know that there was an attorney general opinion about this. The specific areas that could be patrolled, could be policed outside of the campus. To my understanding, he indicated that they'd have full police powers as any other police agency in the state, and that they could go outside of that, but the bill is specific about what areas would be eligible to have this police force operate and what circumstances they could ever go outside of that. As we continue to have these discussions, it is critical that we clarify this, because if even representatives of Johns Hopkins are confused or misrepresenting what the language of the bill says, that's a bad predictor of what we could expect to have happen as we continue down this road if we don't repeal the bill.
Thank you, Senator Carter. Just want to once again just say thank you to each and every witness that was here with us today. We very much appreciate so. If you could just turn your cameras off and please remain muted as we go on with the rest of our delegation hearing. At this point, I just want to see if there's a posture or will of the body to take any action on Senate Bill 276 at this moment.
276, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Is this this is Visit Baltimore?
No, sir, this is still the bill that we're talking.
Sorry, I thought we were in.
Sure. Senate Bill 276. Seeing none at this moment, we are going to go and move on to voting. Colleagues, we will now vote on Senate Bill 789, Visit Baltimore, calculation. We all received an amendment to the bill yesterday in the bill hearing. I see that Natasha Mihu is also with us. So colleagues, I would like to bring to your attention amendment number 153. 22/1. And Ms. Mihu, I just want to give you the opportunity if you want to say what the amendment does.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the amendment here, it essentially changes the date of enactment for moving to that 3-year rolling average of actual receipts. The administration had been working very closely with Visit Baltimore just to address how dire the financial situation was given the pandemic, to come to an agreement on a path forward to ensure that in balancing the city's finances and Visit Baltimore's finances, we could move forward at a slightly earlier date for moving to that 3-year rolling average. And so we would just urge a favorable report on this. We're all in agreement between the administration and Visit Baltimore that this is the best path forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your explanation. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, just really quickly before we.
Yes, sir. Senator Ferguson.
So what is the financial impact on this one? What is the net impact? What happens with this amendment?
I apologize. I don't have the specific information on hand as to how moving it to 2022 would differ from the way the bill was as introduced.
Okay. I'm just trying to it's the 3-year average from, it's changing what the 3-year average is, the date on which the 3-year average starts. Is that accurate?
Yes. So right now they receive the 1-year projected receipts. And so what typically happens is that 2 fiscal years after those receipts are actualized, then we have to go back, and if there's shortages or overages, it has to be worked out between the city and Visit Baltimore. And so moving to the 3-year actual rolling average would use the actual hotel receipts instead of projections and remove that uncertainty.
Thank you, Ms. Mihu. I'd move the amendment.
Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Washington. Are there any questions? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none opposed, the amendment passes. Is there a motion?
Move the bill as amended.
The bill has been moved as amended. I think I saw Senator Sidnor's hand go up. Is that a second, Senator Sidnor? That's a second by Senator Sidnor. All those that are in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Seeing unopposed, Senate Bill 789 passes as the bill is amended, and we'll get the letter over to the delegation letter over to the our colleagues of B&T. Colleagues, at this moment, we currently are finished the business of our delegation at this moment. So we still have bills that could come over in the House of Delegates that comes over to our respective chamber that may not have been passed in some capacity from here. So please keep your emails open. Cody will be reaching out to you from that standpoint. And if there's any issue that you all want to bring up, please feel free to send an email to myself. If you email Cody, I just ask that you carbon copy me on that message, please. At this moment, I see if there are anything that folks want to bring up for the good of discussion for our Senate delegation, as we do every week. Seeing nothing at the moment. So at 10:24, this ends our delegation hearing, and just want to say thank you for the work we did. Thank you again.